Thank you all for being here. We have over 100 people online, around 300 people registered. I hope some more join us, but 100 is a fantastic number for this first event of our first ever online Men's Health Summit, which we're calling Men's Health Connected. For those of you don't know, my name is Glen Poole, and I'm the CEO of the Australian Men's Health Forum. To start with, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the many different lands on which we're all meeting today. To acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging. And to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present. Also to acknowledge that it's Reconciliation Week here in Australia. So thank you for joining this debate, the big debate. How do we make male suicide a national priority? Before we start, just a little background on why we're doing this. So the Australian Men's Health Forum is a peak body for men's health in Australia. We're a membership organisation. We represent individuals and organisations who are working to improve the lives and the health of men and boys in Australia. And we have a legacy now which dates back at least 25 years. So the first national men's health gathering, which was held in Melbourne in 1995. And until about 3 months ago, we were working very hard to deliver our 25th anniversary national men's health gathering, again in Melbourne, which was due in the middle of May. And I don't know if any of you've noticed, but there's been a bit of a pandemic, and that sort of put the kibosh on us doing a face-to-face gathering. So whilst that event's been postponed for now, we thought it'd be a nice idea to have a bit of a meeting online. That idea of having a bit of a meeting online got bigger and bigger, as big ideas often do. And before we knew where we were hosting an entire month of conversations and debates and symposia and forums and roundtables on the many different aspects of men's health. Each week throughout June has a particular theme, and this first week the theme is male suicide and men's mental health. And today we have an excellent panel to kick us off with a discussion on how we can make male suicide as an issue a national priority. So I'm going to start by just introducing you to the panel, for those who've only just recently arrived. We have 4 speakers on the panel. In no particular order, we have Dr. Seidler of Movember. We have Chris Lockwood, alive, and we have Shmigel, formerly CEO of Lifeline, and on our board, and on the board of Roses in the Ocean, which is a suicide prevention organisation, and a man who brings lots of different hats and experience to the conversation of male suicide prevention, as many of us do. As I'm sure many of you will be aware, 8 people a day in Australia die by suicide, 6 are men and 2 are women. So we say, as a men's health organisation, we need to place more focus on the gendered nature of suicide. We focus on male suicide because that's our area of interest. Doesn't mean to say we're not concerned about female suicide. Of course we are, and we do believe that a more gendered and gender-specific approach would be beneficial in terms of preventing female suicide too. But the figures are clear: 3 times more suicides are male than female, and that's why we think it's an issue that needs a very particular focus as male suicide. And of course, a gender inclusive approach, which takes into account the needs of men and of women, also needs to take into account the needs of diverse genders and diverse sexualities. When we talk about male suicide, we're talking about suicide in all men of diverse backgrounds, whether they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, whether they're predominantly white or culturally and linguistically diverse, whether they're from the poorest backgrounds or the richest backgrounds, whether they're living in cities or rural and remote communities or suburbs, whether they're teenagers, even boys in some cases, young boys under 10, or whether they're older men over 85. We care about every suicide, and specifically, we believe there needs to be a focus on the issue of male suicide. And that's why we've brought together a panel today of people who spent a lot of time focused on that very issue, male suicide prevention. So we have 4 panelists. The way it's going to go is like this. We're going to ask each of our panelists probably 3, maybe 4 questions, each in a round. I really encourage you to think of this as a conversation. So get involved right from the start. Use the chat box. Share your ideas, your thoughts, your experiences. It's okay to share links to things. If you think of projects that are relevant to the conversation, you can share those. We really want you to use this as an opportunity to network and share the wealth of knowledge there is in the room. And we'll keep an eye on those questions and those comments. And after we've given our panel the opportunity to explore this question, then we'll open it up to the rest of the room and see where we can take the conversation. This particular part of today is due to finish at 3:15. We had considered having a second panel exploring this a little further. We're not going to do that, but we will keep the room open if people want to keep having the conversation, but we'll allow our esteemed panelists the right to pop off at 3:15 because that's all they committed to. So enough from me. I'm going to start with question 1, which is a really interesting question, really easy question, which is basically who are you and why are you interested in male suicide? And I'm going to start with Dr. Zach Seidler.
Thank you, Glenn. And thanks everyone for coming. This is like just a huge Zoom call of mates. It's pretty cool. And it's lovely to see plenty of familiar faces. It's also great that everyone's put aside this time to chat about something that, you know, to kind of contextualize where I stand in this. In the world of male suicide prevention, I would say that it is my world, more so than how it fits into my life. It's my day-to-day. It you know, follows me most of every waking moment due to the role that I have, which is kind of unique, and I'm very lucky to have multiple different roles. First and foremost, I'm the Director of Mental Health Training at Movember, and while I have a beard at the moment, our CEO is not happy about that, so I will be getting rid of it, and you will just be seeing this eventually. But for now, because I get to be at home, I will continue to grow the beard out. I'm also a clinical psychologist who specializes in seeing men, and due to my lack of time, I only really see young men who are highly at risk. So I have plenty of anecdotes there. And finally, I'm a research fellow at the University of Melbourne, and I've been doing men's mental health research for several years now. And it is my greatest passion. It's something that wakes me up in the morning and keeps me going every day, as I know it does most of you as well. I also sadly have lived experience. I lost my dad to suicide 7 years ago, nearly this week. And, you know, while I could say that trying to strive for answers to understand what took place there is something that keeps me going, but there's so many stories, and since I began my practice, I've now heard of so many. So, you know, while my dad may have lit the fire, there's plenty still going. And I just want to thank everyone here who has lived experience, because I know that the vast majority of you do, for your efforts and your time. And let's just continue fighting the good fight, I guess. So that's me for now.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks for being here, and thanks for acknowledging the kind of the family nature of the sector and the conversation. I was thinking about when I first met all the panelists today, and I realised that I met yourself, Pete Shmigel, and Gus Warland, who obviously is connected to Tim Hodgson, as Tim will explain, all at the same meeting in Parramatta about 3.5 years ago, and you've all been a big part of my sort of professional. You
were wearing a memorable pink shirt.
We were joined by the love of pink shirts at the time. I'm glad to see we've extended our wardrobe, and that we actually got on the phone and checked what we were wearing so we didn't clash. Yeah. Thanks for being here, Zach. So I'm going to go to Chris next, and then to Tim. Chris.
Thanks for that, Glenn, and thank you and the team for organising today to get this sort of group together, such a broad sweep of our sector and the community. It really is sensational, because to me, what we do at Mates in Construction, also Mates in Mining and Mates in Energy, is it really is about how we can actually work together as a community to do a better job of actually making sure that male suicide is reduced. I head up Mates in Construction nationally. We were established 13 years ago, and the reason we were established because an industry actually stood up and said, we've got a problem here. We recognise that the rates of suicide amongst our people is too high, and that we need to take ownership and do something about it. And it was from that the idea of Mates was actually established. So we're an industry-owned organisation, and our focus really is on actually working. It's a predominantly male-dominated industry. We also recognise that suicide isn't only an issue for men, but sadly, particularly in our industries, we know that it actually is something that impacts greatly on men working in construction, mining, and energy, but also in the broader community. So we're set up to actually work specifically in the workplace to build the connections, to make sure that those people that weren't connecting to help knew that they actually had friends nearby, mates that they could actually rely on to help connect them to help when they're in a time of need. So for us, there's a lot that can be done here, but there's also a lot of simple things that we already are doing. And by building stronger senses of community and connection, I know that's what we're focused on, but I know we're not alone in that. There's a lot of optimism that we can actually make real differences in terms of reducing the rates of suicide. So for me, I too have my own lived experience of suicide, with an uncle taking his life when I was a younger person, as well as friends at school. And I know from not just my lived experience, but also the lived experience of our broader network, it's actually through sharing stories and being real about it that we are going to be able to make a meaningful difference. So really looking forward to being a part of today, and welcome the opportunity. So thank you, Glenn, and all.
Great, thanks for being here, Chris. So I'll move straight on to Tim Hodgson from Gotcha for Life.
Thank you, Glenn. Well done organising this. It's amazing. Great to see everyone, Chris, Zach, and everyone on the call. So my name's Tim Hodgson. I am CEO of Gotcha for Life. I guess my background is probably quite different to many on the call here. I guess I was a sportsman back in England for a very brief period of time. I wasn't good enough, sadly. I've finally admitted that to myself. It's taken many years. And then moved to Australia in 2005, marketing agencies, sports marketing agencies for a while. So leading groups of people in corporate environments, and until I found my way to writing the bid to bring the Invictus Games here. So I was involved with two guys from Deloitte, to put our hand up and try and bring the games over, having witnessed them in London and being touched by the power of sport to support these incredible people, veterans and serving members, male and female, to rehabilitate and reintegrate back into communities. And of course, that veteran community struggles massively with suicide statistics, but mental health, PTS, across the board. All those 500 competitors, those that saw the Invictus Games here in Sydney about a couple of years ago now, all those 500 competitors were basically putting their hand up and being vulnerable together. They were opening up to the challenges that they had and using the support network around them, and using the games and the community that it gave them to drag them forwards effectively through some really tough times. So I found it unbelievably inspiring in so many ways. Learned a lot about mental health. Absolutely don't have the depth of knowledge of a lot of people here, but I have a sort of a commercial and marketing lens on everything. I met Gus Wallen during the games. I brought him in as an ambassador, and he started Gotcha for Life early 17, which is when we opened the doors of our organising committee for the Invictus Games. So we were sort of going on a parallel paths, I guess, and I really respected what he was doing. I loved the nature of the preventative approach that he has, and the programs that he was supporting that help people connect, to give people the tools to connect better and look after each other. And thankfully he asked me to be a part of the next phase of growth for Gotcha. So that's my background and involvement in the mental health space. We are quite male orientated. We're not exclusively males. We have programs that do go to females, girls and adults. Men is where it started, and the male focus is a passion of Gotcha for Life, it must be said.
Great, thanks for being here, Tim. I feel like you're a newer member to the family, having only met you in the past, only seen you face to face actually last week for the first time, haven't we?
That's right.
But yeah, like I said, our relationship with Gotcha for Life and the Man Up program, which preceded that, there was a lot of conversation about the Man Up program at the Australian Men's Health Forum's 2015 National Men's Health Gathering, when Professor Jane Purkis came and presented about that. So these interconnections between the men's health sector and the male suicide prevention sector. And the first time I met mates was at a National Men's Health Gathering in, I think, 2013, when I was still English and came over, before I became an Anglo-Australian or a born-again Queenslander, as I now claim to be. So yeah, when I first came to the National Men's Health Gathering in 2013 was when I first heard about mates. So there's a real overlap between the men's health sector and many different approaches to male suicide prevention. And it's great to start to get to know you. Didn't realise you were another Pom, but there we go.
Hand in hand. Good to meet you properly, mate.
Yeah, and so completing the international flavour, I still can't work out which nationality our next guest, Pete Shmigel, is, but I'm absolutely delighted that he's with us. Pete.
More strength to your arm, Glenn, for all the extraordinary organizational efforts to bring this really good group of people together. I want to acknowledge during Reconciliation Week that I'm on the lands of the Burmadigal clan of the Darug Nation here in Western Sydney. Was their land, is their land, always will be their land. I don't do that perfunctorily. I think there's a lot to learn from Indigenous culture in terms of support, healing, and going forward as men in the context of male suicide. And I might circle back to that. Who am I? Crikey. I'm a yes man. I say yes to people who come along and ask me to do stuff. Usually they probably have a good reason, and I say yes. And as a result of that, I've been CEO of Lifeline. I'm currently CEO of an organization that represents about $10 billion worth of business and about 50,000 high-vis jobs in the economy and everything that goes with the high-vis economy, including stuff that's familiar to people who talk a lot about male suicide. I've done corporate jobs, places like Telstra, Veolia, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm going to bring to this conversation today is two things. The first is, on and off, I spent about 13 years full-time in politics as an advisor to ministers and premiers in this country and a place called Ukraine too. I've been a pollster. I've been a candidate. I've been a campaign manager, I think about 20 times over the time, voluntarily and paid and otherwise. And so part of what I'm going to do today is I'm going to look at you. By you, I mean the men's sector and those interested in male suicide prevention through the eyes of a political operative, from the side of the table that I used to sit on rather than this side of the table. And I might actually do a bit of a critique about why male suicide is or isn't a national priority based on what we as a sector are or are not doing in a political context and in an advocacy context. The second thing I bring to this call is I am a person of lived experience, both through family and myself. I'm in a great place now, and I'm very grateful for that. I acknowledge that a lot of people don't get through to the other side. And lived experience in a different way, I guess because I've done a lot of big jobs. My mates tend to be other people from big jobs, thankfully not exclusively, but yeah, a fair few. And I guess some reason they feel a little bit safe around me. So I'm not going to put a number on it. It's twee. But I'll just say that I get, as many of the people on this Zoom call do, very regular phone calls from men who are in crisis. And it's made me reflect on things like the myths around male suicidality, the greatest one being that we don't talk, the gaps in service delivery, and the frustrations that I, for example, feel that I'm basically operating out of my brain and a few notes to do referrals and organize support and all of that, as opposed to a system, if you will. That is my primary motivation in participating in AMHF and RITO and policy debates as an advocate, as a person of lived experience, is to actually not just set male suicide as a priority, but to build the system, the network, the safety net that currently does not exist for men in crisis.
Thanks, Pete. Great to have you here. Still not entirely sure who you are, but you clearly, whatever hat you wear at any meeting I ever go to, you always bring great value. So I'm looking forward to being critiqued. I really am. So I suppose I should just share a little of who I am, so you know where my contributions are coming from. So I got into this sector through personal experience of being a separated dad 20 years ago. Actually, prior to that, being an at-home dad, and then being a separated dad, and got a glimpse of the pathway that men sort of can go along when they go through things like separation and going through the court system and struggling with their relationship with their kids and their ex and all that kind of stuff, and money and all that kind of stuff. So that was my first real introduction to suicide, other than losing a close mate in my 20s, which I never really processed at the time, but did many years later. And then I got really interested in working with men and boys, and that's what I've been doing passionately for 20 years. In the UK, I was involved in working with a national charity called CALM, the Campaign Against Living Miserably, which is the first charity that I'm aware of anywhere in the world that was actually focused on male suicide prevention specifically. So that got me thinking about this issue a lot. And then when I came to Australia to live 5 years ago now, I looked around the sector and thought, well, what's missing? And I thought a unifying focus on male suicide. And so I created the Stop Male Suicide Project, through which I met many people that are here today in the first instance. Was traveling around the country in a motorhome with my partner. We ran events in every state and territory. And when we did, we brought together as many different people who were interested in and focused on male suicide prevention. And that's what's important to me. There is no one singular solution to this problem. That's why it's perfect that I work in a sector body which doesn't try to deliver the solution, but tries to bring the many different people and organizations that can work together to create better solutions, such as conversations like this. So that's what I bring to this conversation. It's a personal passion, but also I hope a real willingness, a real commitment to actually bring people together and allow people to attack this really important problem, this really important social issue from many different angles, and to protect against any one approach, any one narrative, any one interest group actually dominating the conversation or the approach about what we need to do. And the final piece for me, I'll say, I now sit on the expert advisory group to Christine Morgan, the PM's National Suicide Advisor. So I think I've got a good insight into what's happening at a strategic level, but also, like probably everyone involved, because I talk about this topic a lot, because I'm a good listener, as well as talking a lot. I have suicide prevention conversations with people, with men, on a regular basis. I'm kind of glad that we've had lockdown, because it means that I don't have a conversation with an Uber driver once a week now about suicide, because it seemed for a while that I couldn't go anywhere in the country and get in an Uber from the airport without the Uber driver telling me his suicide story. So there's a lot of men out there who want to talk, and I think making sure that men are a massive part of this conversation, men of all backgrounds are part of this conversation, is really important to the solution. and really important to the goal that I want us to focus around, which is how do we make suicide a national priority. And there's a couple of ways that I think I mean that. I mean, in terms of it being a sort of a public priority, like a broader social priority, and also in terms of actually being a political priority. And let me state my claim that it isn't before I ask our panelists to sort of respond to why it isn't. Let me state my claim. 6 suicides a day and it's not going down. Male suicide has gone up in numbers 30% in the last decade. Do we have a national male suicide prevention policy? No. Are men targeted specifically in most suicide prevention efforts? No. Does funding get directed specifically at male suicide? More than before? Not enough, in my view. And it's not just that. Male suicide isn't just a mental health issue. Male suicide is shaped by a whole range of social factors that have a gendered dimension, whether that's separation and how dads experience that different from mums, whether that's unemployment and economic hardship and how men experience that in different ways to women, whether that's homelessness, whether that's experience of being sexually abused as a child and how men experience that differently from women. All of these issues, of course, they impact women just like they impact men, but they also impact us in gendered ways. And when you look right across the country at national and state strategies and policies, not just around suicide, but around mental health, around physical health, around social issues, there is an absolute absence of strategic frameworks, of policies, of action plans that focus on these issues from a gender perspective, taking into account the specific needs of men and boys. Taking into account the specific needs of men and boys is exactly what our national men's health strategy says the health system should be doing. And it's not just the health system, it's all the other systems of government and all the other institutions that work, that combine to make the country work. There is an absolute absence over and over again, a blind spot to men as a group that should be targeted for social issues generally, but suicide specifically. So I believe quite clearly, unequivocally, and this is my personal view, that male suicide is not yet a national priority and it needs to be. But what do our panelists think? So I'll stick with the order so you get used to that rhythm, and I will come back to Zach. We'll give you, say, about 3 minutes with this question each. Over to you, Zach.
Give me a countdown when I crap on for too long.
Okay.
For the sake of debate, and because I have a death wish, I'm going to say, I can read my room, obviously. I'm gonna throw some curveballs at everyone and say, firstly, if we're to look at the country-wide perspective on suicide and whether or not it's a priority, it's very clearly not. So male suicide aside, I guess, suicide full stop is not a priority. We are getting there, and let me be very clear, and I think I've said this to a few of you over and over again, and it could just be my young naivety, but I think that we are leading the world in this space, in this country. I have now, thankfully, been able to hop over to Canada, the States and the UK and see what their systems and frameworks are looking like, and they are a decade behind us, I think, in many instances, in the way that they are conceptualizing this stuff, the amount of funding and focus. We are at a precipice, I think, in many ways, in that we are on the verge of getting, Suicide Prevention Australia is putting together a male suicide strategy. It's in the works. And so it is not good enough at the moment. Let's be clear. We know that. But I think that we are making extreme headway against a very strong headwind. And I think that we need to focus on that and pay attention to the progress that we're making. In saying that, I want to suggest, Glen, to you, I guess, in many ways, that I think it's not, to you personally, it's not only about male suicide. And I want to pull back here a little bit, because I think there is good reason why we focus on the pointy end here. It's something that grabs attention. That's how we got 100 people onto this call. But I think we need to stay away from the pointy end and look at antecedents, and we need to look at social determinants, and we need to interrogate boys' upbringing, their education. We need to look at male distress in and of itself, pre-suicide, pre-suicidal ideation. what it looks like and where it comes from. Because if we look purely at male suicide, we miss the story in many ways. I think the opportunities for intervention are much, much earlier. And as I've spent my whole life really doing now, is posing the argument for the fact that services need a revolution and a huge adaptation if they are going to in any way be able to understand and respond to male distress. They can't respond to men's suiciding. You know what I mean? We can't talk about, sadly, in many instances, it's very hard to backtrack once somebody is dead. And so we should be trying to understand how that took place, but we need to pivot the focus, I think, in many ways, and start to look at the seeds that are starting this whole situation, and break that apart and go, what can we do at what point in time? Where are the best roads for intervention? You know, I don't want to draw attention to the US right now because it's extremely distressing, and I'm sure that many of you are feeling this, and there are too many similarities with the way that we are dealing with the Indigenous men in this country as well. But this idea of like the angry black man, you know, for years and centuries, there's this pain and suffering. And that's the perfect metaphor for what we need to do here. It's not when men like George are murdered that we need to have this conversation. Just like it's not when there's a male suicide that we need to have this conversation. We need to have it when there's a man in distress who calls you, who needs something to be done. That's when something needs to change. It's before that, when he's a boy and he's watching, you know, God knows what's happening in his house. So we need to be ahead of the curve, not waiting for the crisis. And I think too often we're responding to statistics. This 75%, I would say the majority of Australians now could tell you that 75% of suicides are men. I think we've done a really good job at promoting that message. Now it's trying to get in front of that number. I think
right.
that's really what's important. So that's my final call, I guess, is the idea around we don't know more than we know. So let's stop looking at it as an endpoint and start to go, there is so much unknown. Let's not shy away from that. We need better research. We need more funding, obviously. We need it to be a bigger priority, but we need to show it for the depth that it really is. You know, much like domestic violence, male suicide goes on behind closed doors. It's silent. It's very hard to see the true scale of it. So we need lived experience to be front and center, and we need to get to the beginning, not the end.
Thank you, Zach. Great start. Chris Lockwood.
Thanks for that, Glenn. And that was a great start, Zach. I thought the stuff you're covering there just rang so true for me. I know, to me, one of the really big things that stands out for this is like we're going through a process of naming it. You know, we're calling out that male suicide is an issue, and there's been a progression, and I think it, you know, Zach was talking about that idea that the 3/4 number is, you know, widely known now, but that's only that very first step. And for me, there's a couple of different sort of tendrils or paths about what we need to do to actually make it a genuine priority. But moving on from naming it to owning it, I think, and that owning piece has to happen in a lot of different places, in a lot of different spaces. I know it's, you know, from a governmental point of view, like obviously, you know, under genuine policy that actually looks across the whole of the community. You know, governments do take ownership of these sorts of things, but in specific ways where they're actually addressing it. But I think it's beholden on the broader sectors, all of us here on the call, the different parts we've actually got to play, to think, what is it that is actually specific about male suicide that sits within our purview and within our control? So I know, I mean, you know, for the construction industry, established mates, because they did, you know, put a hand up and said, we've got a problem here and we need to do something about it. And to my mind, that was a really optimistic thing that I sit in absolute awe of, you know, the predecessors for me, and to actually set up the program like such as Mates, simply because they did move to that point of like, we're not going to just talk about it, we're going to say this is ours, we're going to do something about it. And I think that now I know that's a very broad sort of thing to say, but I actually think if we can get to the point where more people actually take ownership of it in their purview, in their area, say this is something that we're going to do something about, I think that would actually make a really substantial difference. And I also agree with that idea of the research, knowing, I can confidently say there is higher rates in construction than there are in other industries. And that's only because there was actual research done. It moved from anecdotal to the point where it got peer reviewed, it's published, it's real. Building that evidence base for the problem actually helps people have confidence about why we need to build the solution. So there's a lot we can be doing, but I think if we actually focus on a couple of those tendrils, I reckon we can make that next leap forward.
Right. Thanks, Chris. Nicely built. I'll jump straight to Tim.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Agree with both of you. Zach, I'm on the Zach train a bit as well about the earlier, prevention piece. But I'm not necessarily completely in agreement with and this is slightly anecdotal, is that the country really understand the stats. The everyday person out there are really being communicated to effectively about the scale of the issue. So, and I say that off the back of just speaking to mates locally here. And if you tell them 8 a day, 6 out of 8 are males, the 75% thing, 15 to 44, number one way to die for males, etc. It completely shocks people. And so I don't think we're communicating effectively enough to people to raise the scale of the issue amongst the broader community. And as such, it sort of slips by as this thing that's really hard to understand because it's such a complex issue, mental health in general. And we're also, we're talking about an issue that guys, find it hard to talk about. So try to communicate to a bunch of people who find it hard to communicate about it. So it is challenging. And my sense is we spend so much of our life in 3 core areas. 1 at school, it's a captive community. 2 in the workplace, captive community. And then 3 in and around our communities, homes, sports clubs, whatever, whatever we're into. And if you look at each of those individually, I don't feel like we're taking it seriously enough. Schools, why are we not teaching kids what they need to really understand? Why are we not teaching communication, not just addition and subtraction, and really understanding emotions, etc. The workplace, I think, is improving in its broader awareness of, like the rest of the community, of mental health. But I was leading an agency 4 or 5 years ago, and I was very green in this area, and I don't think our broader group, which was a considerably large group, really were taking it seriously internally. It was lip service. It was a bit on the side. And that's moved forwards a bit, but I think the workplace is battling with it, and corporate Australia has more resources than anyone to really raise awareness of this issue. And in the community, I think the system's just so complicated. So we don't know where to go. We don't know how to talk about it because we haven't been taught it. So those 3, when I always try and simplify things, especially something so complex as this. I think if you look at those 3 key environments, there are steps we can take, I think, in each to raise the profile of this issue and push it up the priority list. But I just don't think we're doing it. So that would be where I'm coming from.
Right. Thank you, Tim. Good to get your perspectives. So we'll, last but not least on this particular part of the conversation, Pete Shmigel.
Is it a national priority? The answer is, of course, no. Should it be a national priority? The answer is, of course, yes. You just got to listen to the stats that people have rattled off, and to some of the causative issues and some of the social determinants, etc. That is all a no-brainer. So therefore, why isn't it a national priority? And we could certainly basically look at power dynamics, and we could certainly look at cultural and structural issues, etc., etc. But you know what? The easiest place to always start looking is at oneself. And I would say to this august group that the absence of male suicide as a national priority, the lack of a specific male suicide strategy and the funding and the resources and the focus that goes with that, reflects our absence of putting forward a united, agreed argument and strategy. Usually when there's a vacuum in policy or a vacuum in politics, it's because a group of stakeholders, a group of interests in the community have not acted in concert to fill it. And here we are, we're running the patriarchy, hey? And we haven't figured out a way to basically get male suicide on the agenda beyond, and I can see what Zach is saying, awareness around some of the numbers and progress compared to the rest of the world. On progress compared to the rest of the world, I'd say this: we eat better than the kings of 150 years ago. We're the richest society in the world. We should be in first place when it comes to male suicide. It's immoral that impoverished men and Aboriginal men and high-vis men die of male suicide in the richest and most educated society on the planet in history. So my point is, we haven't got our act together. Let me describe it this way, the way I would to my mates, the pub. We've lacked balls. Okay, think of public policy as a game, you know, and think about what happens in a game like achieving a goal that says male suicide is a national priority. You have players on the paddock, you've got referees, you've got coaches, you've got administrators, you've got groundskeepers, you've got fans in the bleachers, you've got fans at home. Now think about male suicide and who are all the players, who are the referees, who are the groundskeepers, who are we? We're a bunch of guys in the cheap seats who occasionally comment on whether or not the players are doing the right things, or the groundskeepers did a good job with the pitch, or the refs basically made the right call or or the wrong call. We are not in the game. And that is the real challenge and the opportunity for the future, is whether or not, you know, the male health sector, the men's suicide prevention sector chooses to be in the game by adopting a theory of change, by adopting some kind of unity and unison in its messaging and in its delivery to affect positive public policy change. And I will talk as we go through about how we get in the game.
Thank you, Pete Shmigel. So, great opening gambit. So, we have, I'm not going to attempt to summarize all four positions. My brain started to do that. I thought, no, I'm not up to it. I'm not up to it. But we have a diversity of opinion, clearly. So I'm going to reflect back some thoughts for me. The first one is this. It's really interesting, and it just struck me when I was looking about what unites this panel. And it's not just because I know you, right?
We've lost you.
Right? It's because, you know, you are people who are really in this conversation for good. And it's really hard to find. When I first got interested in like making change at a national or a level of a city, the first thing I always look for is who's the person in charge that I can go and speak to. And so often, particularly when it comes to men's issues, when you go into the system, you know, who is the person in charge of male suicide prevention in Australia or in New South Wales or in my local PHN area? Who's the male suicide prevention officer or czar, or who is that person? That person doesn't exist. It's almost impossible to find a male suicide prevention officer. I don't know of one. And so here we are, mates, Movember, Gotcha for Life, all predominantly funded from outside of government. So that's really interesting. The fact that the key people who are really in this conversation for good seem to be funded from independently funded, mostly. A second point is to say that I do want to acknowledge that change has happened. I've seen change happen in the past 3 or 4 years in Australia. I've certainly seen change happen in the last 10 years and 20 years while I've been in the conversation of male suicide and men's health. Right? It is now more of it's a thing. Male suicide is a thing, and men's mental health is a thing that people actually talk about. And I think Movember's shift from, you know, targeting funding or campaigns to get funding from cancer into, or in addition, adding mental health and male suicide, both has in some ways led that shift, but also reflects that shift. So it is now a thing that people are aware of or talk about. And bit by bit at a systemic level, yeah, we're seeing change happen. So we've got in the room Professor John McDonald, and I saw his, arguments about focusing away from the mental health model and more on the situational model in papers dating back to 2003. And now, though using different language, a lot of what Christine Morgan is talking about is about moving suicide from mental health to a broader range of government departments to look at many of the social factors that lead to suicide. When Zach, you reference things like Suicide Prevention Australia, looking now at a male suicide policy. Well, I don't know if we take credit, but certainly AMHF, for example, has decided to not be on the outside commenting on what's happening on the pitch, but find ways of getting into the game and being on the pitch by, for example, becoming a member of Suicide Prevention Australia and seeking to influence the sector from the inside out, rather than complaining about the sector from the outside in. So I acknowledge change is happening, definitely. I believe also that our sector can take some credit for that change. And I agree with Pete Shmigel that we need to be a damn sight better at delivering it. And I think one of the barriers to change happening is our failure and our inability to work together collaboratively, but rather to chase our own agendas. And I think that's probably not unique to our sector, but I think it has a particular flavor in the men's health sector or in men's organizations. It has a particular flavor, that competitiveness, that lack of willingness to collaborate. So that's where I see we're at. And I'm really interested to hear, you can pick any strand you want in this final round of questions, but the one I'd really love to hear you. So the broader question is, what can we do better, right? If you want to wrestle with it, is that how can we work together better which is kind of the theme of our Men's Health Connected event. We're all working apart together. So what can we do better? And if you choose, how can we work together better? And again, same order, Dr. Zach Seidler.
Thank you, man. That's a very good summation. And I think I obviously contradicted myself in saying that I started out by playing devil's advocate and then just said what everyone else said anyway. So that's my way of it's hedging my bets. So I think that we're all clear about where we stand when it comes to the statistics. We're all clear on where we stand when it comes to what is needed potentially moving forward. I really like what you said, Glenn, and I've had a bit of a beef with the non-for-profit organisations for quite a while until I got into Movember. And now I've spoken internally about this as well. So I want everyone to know that, that I have no time for disagreements and petty fights amongst all of us who are all doing and striving for the same thing in many ways. So I think we need to come together. And one of my main arguments here is around the fact that we need to campaign together, and we need to campaign with a very clear message about what we want. And so that's what I think Glen and AMHF has done so well, is the idea around not being as potentially small time as we have in the past, and staying very insular as well. And Glen has been great at pulling in some ministers, and thankfully I got to go as well to Canberra and throw a sly joke at Scott Morrison about his lack of moustache. But I think that we need to be hitting harder. We need to be going out. And while there are plenty of people who should be canvassing in their own communities, there are some people who should be rallying at a government level, at a much higher level, trying to pull resources where it need be. in saying that, my main point here is that if we are to make male suicide a national priority, here is the question. If you got $1 billion tomorrow, what would you do with it? What are you going to, where are you going to invest that you think it is actually going to have any difference in this game? I'm very lucky to be a part of a grant with Jane Perkis that Greg Hunt announced last week. We got $5.6 million. Mates is a part of it. Movember's a part of it. Gotcha for Life is a part of it. We're all coming together. It's the largest grant known to man on this earth for men's mental health. We're starting this dialogue and the government is responding, which is really great. We have a very clear set of things that we want to tick off there. But if we got $1 billion tomorrow, we'd all fight to try to say that our thing is the thing that needs to take place. And who knows if any of them would actually make a fucking difference. That's the thing that really bothers me. So on the flip side, if the male suicide rate halved tomorrow, if it was suddenly the statistics for 2019 came out and the rate is 1,250 men, say, why? Would we have any ability to answer why that took place? I highly doubt it. I had this discussion with someone at the International Association for Suicide Prevention around if we got heaps of money or the suicide rate just completely moved up or down, do we really have enough intel to make a difference here? And so what I think is that we need more knowledge. There is too much diversity in this experience of male suicide. There are too many unknowns. We need to speak to men. We need to hear from men. You know, we need to hear from lived experience, but we also need to hear from the bereaved, the families of those who've lost someone. And we need better targeted research. You know, the fact that I'm as young as I am and I shouldn't be on this call. Let me be clear. I shouldn't have a voice, but there has been a vacuum. And so I'm you know, gladly taking up the call because I want to do as much as I can, but there aren't enough tiers here. And so we need to build up an industry and organizations that are not thin on the ground, that go beyond, I guess, having a very just face level approach, I guess, and with a bit more depth there. So that's my spiel for now.
Thank you. And sir, you very much. Doctor. You weren't a doctor when I met you, and you didn't have $6 million of research funding.
Boy.
And you should have been in the conversation then, and you should be in the conversation now. Chris Lockwood.
I have to say a lot of what you're talking about there again, Zach, really rings true for me in terms of what we can be doing better at. I know if we don't start from a genuine sort of knowledge base and evidence base backed up by research, I think we undersell what the potential of actually can be achieved in this space actually is. So being able to actually meaningfully dig into why is it that men are more likely to kill themselves, and there's a myriad of reasons. Yeah, we've done a bit of that work in the industries we work in, specifically done a deep dive research that has looked at some of the types of work and the levels of control, and this actually helps inform. But I know that's novel research that's been done there. There's a real dearth of information. I also know that even the idea of actually if there were $1 billion to be spent tomorrow, how do we spend it? You're right. We actually have to be really clear in terms of actually what it is we want to do. But I'm quite cognizant though that there isn't enough being spent at the moment. The fact that there was that announcement on the research recently was sensational. Jane pulling that together, and it's a beautiful collaboration. I mean, I think that actually does talk to how there's not always going to be one way to fix a particular issue, just slice it. But by coming together, we'll be able to find the coalition of different approaches that are going to work in the different scenarios. But I do know that increasing the funding pool available for not just the research, yes, but also actually trialling and driving forward those programs that there are evidence bases for. At the moment, I think that there's too much of a broad sweep in terms of how things are actually done, and I understand why a lot of the funding in this space has gone down to the PHNs. It's been to regionalise and I think we need to look at different senses of what a community is. It's important, of course, to look at the geographic community. We look at men in a workplace community. Effectively, we're a community development organisation. We're driving community connections. I think identifying how we can actually find the right communities that men are already a part of to sort of map and build those connections that are actually going to make a meaningful difference. And to me, collaboration is going to be a key driver in that space. And at the moment, another one of the things we're doing is working with the Brisbane North PHN, trying to sort of see if we can map some of these ideas into a community sports setting. And there's a lot of opportunity through collaboration to actually do better things. And I know Roses in the Ocean stand by. There's a lot of very good organisations doing good things, and we do work together. So it's up to us, actually.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, good reference to primary health networks there. There's sort of these mysterious bodies that have been commissioning lots of suicide prevention work at a local level. Tomorrow, we have a whole day bringing together primary health networks to find out some of the things that they've been doing in terms of targeting interventions at men at that local level. I've just posted a link in the chat box and highly recommend, if you've got time, come along to some or all of that. Tim, what can we do better? How can we work together better if you choose that question?
I just got excited about Zach's brief with $1 billion. So
You've been spending it.
Come and live on my island with me, mate.
It's a very good point. It's a good way to think about it. My mind immediately goes to further upstream in the preventative. Doing an audit of the best preventative programs out there and where they deliver in society, and how we might raise the capacity of those organisations. My mind goes to schools immediately. If we think long-term sustainable, then we need to get those best programs for younger boys into schools as a matter of course, as part of the curriculum, however it's organised. But I truly believe that can help us have that long-term sustainable change in society. And when we educate at the younger formative age, when all these, thoughts and emotions are forming. I totally believe in the coordination piece, but coordination needs an audit. We need to understand who's out there before we can understand who we're collaborating with and connecting with and delivering collective impact into communities with. So we always talk about this, but no one really kind of takes it on. I kind of feel, I feel like the corporate sector has a massive role to play, if I'm honest. I think the corporate sector has the most resources and has the most reach, has the most ability to impact people, to advertise to people, to raise awareness of an issue, to galvanize a sphere of influence, whether that's their staff, whether that's their business partners, whether that's the community that they deliver services to. Those with good brand health and purpose is a big thing for corporates now. I think we really need to engage that community in the right way and unlock the potential that sits behind corporates. And around how we work together better, the only frame of reference I'd give that we're trying to achieve here now, our aspirational vision at Gotcha for Life is to be really a representative body for the preventative mental health programs out there. We are a fundraising, awareness, advocate body. We're young, but we're growing. And we want to make sure that we're building the capacity of the best local solutions effectively in communities around the country. And so one example of that is we've just collaborated with Landcare and RAMF for rural and regional New South Wales. And that's a really nice group of organisations. They're so well connected into local communities. RAMF have 20 coordinators around the state that can give us real insight into what's happening on the ground. They're bigger and more well respected than us, in government, etc. But we can work together to fundraise against that proposition and raise the capacity of some of these brilliant local organisations. I think we talked about it last week, Glen, when it was mentioned that local solutions are often the most powerful, but struggle the most with the fundraising. So how do we support those people? And I guess in a sense, that's what we're trying to achieve over time.
Thanks, Tim. So we want to get the $1 billion to you first, and then you'll distribute it to the rest of us in the most benevolent way, having taken your 10% cut. You heard it here first, folks. Right. And for those who aren't in the world of acronyms, I think RAMP is the Rural Adversity Mental Health Program. Great. So, Pete Shmigel. Lost Pete.
What could we do better? And building off Zach's comment about if we were asked the question, what would we spend $1 billion on? When I was a political minder, I used to basically save people a lot of time in meetings when various stakeholders, NGOs, departments, various important people, lobbyists used to come through the door. I used to save us all a lot of time by saying, what do you want from me or my minister? Why? How much does it cost? And what are the risks and opportunities? Now, put ourselves in that position. All right, we have several of the leading organizations in male suicide prevention on this call. If they put 6 of us in the room at the same time with the federal minister, and he said to us, what do you want from me for that $1 billion? Why? Where's the evidence? What are the risks and opportunities politically, socially? In other words, we wouldn't be able to answer it at the moment. We would all have a really good answer if they asked us about our individual organizations and our individual parts of the puzzle and our individual silos within the men's health sector. But as a unified front, we would lack an answer. And it's because we lack that answer that we don't get to national priority. So, I would very practically put to the leaders on this call, because you are leaders, that we have to have an exercise to think about ourselves, not as a series of organizations, but as a cause and as a campaign. And we have to do what any good campaign does, the ones I've been involved in, the simple basics of saying, what's our aim? What's our ambition? Who are our allies? Etc., etc., etc. And we have to actually reduce it down to that simple level in order to be good advocates, lobbyists, and get what we need for the men who need it. I'm going to be controversial here, guys, and I'm going to say $1 billion. You know what? I'm going to reduce that down to $100,000. And if I had $100,000 to spend on male suicide prevention, I'm actually not going to give it to more research and evidence. I'm actually going to give it to building a genuine campaign for change between the organizations on this call.
Got it? So, there we have. Zach wants us to think about what we do with $1 billion. Chris wants us to keep collaborating more, build community solutions. Tim wants the $1 billion, but he'll spend it wisely on our behalf. And Pete Shmigel just wants 100K to build a political campaign. So we've got at least 10 minutes, and I'd really like to hear from anyone in the audience now who's got a question that builds on this conversation. So a couple of things here. Post your questions in the, don't shout out. We'll work out how best to do this. So post questions in the chat box. Also, if you're not familiar with this, if you on the bottom bar next to chat, there's a little button called participants. If you click on participants in the top right hand corner, you'll see some names, and you'll also see some icons: raise hand, yes, no. You can also raise your hand doing that if you want to speak. I won't get to everyone, but also I encourage our panelists to jump in the chat box too and hear what people are asking. In fact, I encourage all of you to jump in the chat box and see what's going on. We will save all of this conversation and do our best to sort of take on board everything that's asked. So that's a good question. So I'm going to go to I'm just going to ask it for you, Wayne at the Centre for Men. There has been a huge amount of different reports and different commissions. And one of them recently was the Productivity Commission report on better mental health. Does it address male suicide in any way? Do we know? Anyone know the answer to that first?
My reading of it, no. It, as everything it points out statistics, it does what it does. In saying that, I understand, having written one of these broader reports, the difficulty getting across, and that's not to excuse it, but I do understand going through every subgroup, and men are not a subgroup. It's a large demographic, but you cannot please everybody, and they chose to please nobody. So I kind of respect that in some ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, my quick snapshot of where we are in the broader strategic framework, which I think is a problem, and it's one of the reasons why we've got today with some key people, which I encourage you to come along to, is that we've got a national mental health strategy. We've got that because people in our sector advocated for it. They advocated for a policy. We're one of the only countries in the world to have one. It highlights amongst its top 10 issues, mental health and specifically male suicide. And then it says for male suicide, you want to go over there and look at the National Male Suicide Prevention Plan. So what you do is then if you go over and look in the National Male Suicide Prevention Plan, you find there's no focus on male suicide specifically. So just at a strategic level, as you end up in closed doors essentially, because nowhere at the very beginning of the thinking process about how we approach suicide is the gendered piece, however it's defined, really well locked in, and then that filters through then to any kind of commission that takes place or what happens at a state level. Though I'll give Queensland a shout here. In terms of men's health strategies, only New South Wales has a framework and WA has a policy, but Queensland's suicide prevention plan does identify men as a vulnerable group. And you're nodding. Do you want to speak to that, Chris, briefly? Because I think, Mates is based in Queensland, and I think actually there's a specific focus on construction in the Queensland.
Look, I agree. Mates was established in Queensland. I've got the fortune or misfortune today to be based in Melbourne myself, and it's very grey and rainy out the window. But the work that the Queensland government's done in terms of that plan is something to be genuinely applauded. They consulted widely. They've looked to try and build collaboration, and they've been brave enough to, as you say, call out the specifics in terms of men and naming industries like construction, saying we actually have to do better. We have to. So not only are they naming it, they are having a crack at actually owning it too by putting a bit of direct funding into some of the programs that are actually going to do work in this space. So as I know we're a national organisation, and as I look around the country, I really do think Queensland, in a lot of ways, is leading Australia in terms of doing more practical, real things for mental health and suicide prevention.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And we've got the National Mental Health Commissioner from Queensland on the panel on Wednesday, so that'd be quite interesting to get more insight from him. I've got Brad's iPad has got he's got a hand up, but I've also got a question in the chat box first, which is from Joseph Acon. Actually, Joseph, do you want to actually pose this question yourself rather than me reading it out for you? If you unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello. I've done QPR training before, which is question, persuade, refer, and I found it very beneficial. I was just wondering what the panel could, talk about how we make it as important as CPR training is portrayed.
I think we're working on that slowly but surely. I think mental health first aid is doing a great job at that. I would suggest, and I've been working for the past couple of years to try and get, lots of people have been talking about situational stresses in the chat box, trying to get male specific understanding of suicidality into QPR. Movember are in the process of hopefully creating a suicide prevention tool that is that has a gendered lens, really, because I don't think that QPR, while quick and dirty, is sufficient to be able to pick up on the nuance and diversity in men's experiences. But I think we should be teaching, mental health first aid to every year 9 and 10 student, the end.
Great, Zach.
And I know there's Living Works also has their Safe Talk program, which Lifeline uses, and we use, which is a gatekeeper piece. There is different approaches, and I think it is incredibly important, and I think Zach's exactly right in terms of actually making sure that there is a lens on them that is something that focuses on the male experience. But I actually do think there is power in actually doing these things, even though getting online and digital is good, face-to-face is better. Where people can actually share experiences, it really reinforces it. And that's something that we see every day in terms of when we're rolling out those programs. They're incredibly powerful. So I agree that we need to do a much better job getting more people with their eyes open doing these sorts of things.
Yeah, there's perhaps a whole bigger conversation about how training works and sometimes doesn't work, but I just want to drop one thing in. And I think, Chris, you noticed this. You're the only other person I know who picked this up, that when you see research on who does the training, we're actually reaching far more women than we're reaching men. Yep. And there's lots of reasons for that, but it's not being picked up as an issue at the moment. And it is an issue for loads of different reasons, because, at least one of the key benefits you get out of doing the training is it builds your own mental health resilience. And so we're delivering all this training mostly to women, and God, that's fantastic. And should we keep doing that? Yes. But actually we need to specifically target training at men in places where men are likely to do it. There's a nice example. I guess, Mates is doing that in many ways by being in the construction space. And another nice example, someone, Justin, I think it was, mentioned QPR being promoted in South Australia through the PHN down there. Now, one example of it really reaching a lot of men was through the wireless steelworks, because I always forget the guy's name, but the guy behind the wireless steelworks, rebuilding of the steelworks, promoted it. He led on promoting it in that male-dominated space. So we need to get more men, I believe, promoting that work and doing that training. I'm going to go to, if he's there, Pete Shmigel.
Okay, so again, I'm acting as a political operative today, and let's use that worked example, and I think it's a great one. Mental health first aid training in years 9 and 10, something that Mates would be into, something Zach would be into, something that Gotcha would be into. I think something that almost all of us would say, really smart, gatekeeper stuff, preventative stuff, existing curricula, proven methodologies, evidence that it works, etc. Right? So let's say that we set ourselves as a goal, as a movement, that that's a good thing. What would we do about it? Would we go off individually as organizations, and in the context of a list of 17 other things, including the fact that we need to get refunded this year as organizations, put it on a list for somebody? And it'll be treated exactly as that. Number 16 out of 17, et cetera, et cetera. Gents, ladies, we're actually not going to get very far until we do what the organizations that are serious about public policy reform in this country do. And that's professional lobbying and advocacy based on campaign techniques. So for example, to take this away from the abstract and the conceptual, let's talk about mental health first aid training. Okay, so which members of parliament have the greatest number of male suicide cases in their electorates? Which of those members of parliament are in marginal seats? Which of those marginal seat members are government members? Which of those government seats are mates with the Minister for Health? And on it goes. How many people of lived experience do we have in those 4 or 5 seats that we've determined to be critical? How many of those people have lived experience? Some of whom are high-vis guys will go and see their local MP wearing their high-vis and make this entirely personal, emotional, poignant, and relevant, as opposed to a weird abstraction out there. Take a look at climate change, folks. You know why nothing gets done about climate change? Because no one can see it, touch it, feel it. Doesn't matter what your politics are. That's the realities of political change. We have to make male suicide, see it, touch it, feel it, for the people who are capable of making decisions in our favor. And that starts from campaign thinking, campaign planning, and activating our resources like men of lived experience. Am I being harsh in this phone call? You betcha. My harshness is proportionate to what I see as a growing need in our community and to a growing and glaring separation between the overall social experience, which is wealthy, highly educated, online, and the reality of the men who are at risk, who are often disconnected, impoverished, and not wholly part of the society. And how much longer are we going to tolerate that?
Yeah. So, question for all of us, how much longer are we going to tolerate it? We're 2 minutes over time and I'm going to do this. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to formally close the conversation to allow our panelists who committed to a certain amount of time to move on with their days if they need to. But we're going to keep the room open because I'm very happy to continue the conversation. It just might not be with the panelists. You'll have to tweet them or pursue them on LinkedIn or email them or whatever if you want to get an answer out of them. So let me say my thank yous first, and any panelists who have an extra 10, 15 minutes, please stick around or make space for others to join the conversation if you wish, entirely up to you. So firstly, a thank you to all the staff and the volunteers who have worked so hard since just March the 13th to pull this together, and our friends at Sprout Labs in Hobart who've been helping us with this project, and particularly Mick today, who's been our producer, seamlessly holding this all together in the background. We've made this happen in just a few weeks, and I hope you'll really support it, not just by taking part in the events, but please get on the Men's Health Connected website and share it far and wide. Yeah, sure, we'll video this stuff, but how often do you say, I'm going to go and watch all those videos from that conference I didn't go to? Pretty much never, right? You've got to be in the room having the conversations because that's where the magic happens. So I get you busy people, you can't come to every event, but you know people who can. Please spread the word about the Men's Health Connected month of events, and we promise we'll do our best to keep this conversation as high in people's minds as possible through our network. I want to thank the awesome Dr. Zach Seidler for everything he's contributed today. I want to thank Chris Lockwood of Mason Construction for being in this conversation. Thank you so much. You're a wonderful man, wonderful work you're doing. The wonderful Tim Hodgson, like I said, is like a new family member, but rapidly becoming like an old friend. Great to have you and Gotcha for Life on board. Pete Shmigel, I never know what you're going to say, but it's always gold. You're a wonderful man. Thanks for making us think. And I'll try and find that $100,000 for you, my friend, because I ain't getting the billion that Zach wants. And if I get the 100,000, it's coming straight to you. So thank you all. And thanks for everyone who's actually attended, because without your attendance, this would have been a few mates talking over a coffee and not a conversation, hopefully that's helping to shift something, because we're more than just a room of people. We're more than a sector. Are we a movement? Not sure if we're a movement, but we're definitely a community. And it's really great to get this community together. So we're a force. Feel the force. Zach Seidler always got the words for us. We are a force. Feel the force. So I'll let our panelists go if they wish, but I'm going to take a few more questions and comments, and I'm just going to open the mic and allow you to jump in, and we'll just see where this may be the daftest thing I've ever done, allowing this crazy mob to take over the mic, but let's see how it goes. And I'm going to go to Brad's iPad first. Brad.
Hi there, I hope you can hear me. Brad Farmer, I'm the founding executive officer of Suicide Prevention Australia and currently the executive officer of Postvention Australia, with the honour of serving as an advisor with Greg Hunt when he was 1997 at the UN. But to quote Professor Graham Martin, our first chairman of Suicide Prevention, when it's all said and done, a lot is said and not much done. So I would like to just, and I've seen many of these groups proliferate out of suicide prevention since the very early days. I just wanted to perhaps point this out that A, B, and C. I'm an advocate, like our colleagues here. A, for advocacy. B, I'll call it brotherhood of brethren, and that's what I consider all of us to be. And C is that I think you've mentioned a movement, but I see as an organisational practitioner, if you like, for all those years, that this conversation, this group could actually form a coalition, a force, a movement, but actually form a more formalised coalition of groups around male suicide prevention. That's all I'd like to contribute, and I thank you for your time today.
Brad, thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your, sounds like decades of experience to this conversation. First time we've met. It's a pleasure and an honour to meet you. So Craig Hughes Cashmore, I see a hand up. Craig, are you still driving, or can you safely contribute?
I'm driving, but I can contribute. I just wanted to back what Pete Shmigel was saying. My experience, I just want to share my experience quickly with you as an advocate, because when I started our organisation, nobody was interested in male survivors of childhood sexual abuse. We were invisible. So we started from a really base level. You know, I walked into the halls of Parliament and people were like, what are you talking about? 2 years later, the Royal Commission was started. The whole landscape changed. And I remember talking to Justice Peter McClellan, and he said to me, Craig, you guys, meaning me and the other advocates, get your shit together. He didn't say that. He said, get organised and find those common points where you can rally together. Now, that proved to be incredibly difficult in our space, as I suspect it is in every space, for all the reasons we already know about. It's the same across every sector. But you know what? I had the opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister. In fact, I met with two. And we wanted something. I got together over 30 organisations that work in this space, and we put together a white paper. And when I sat down with the PM, I was able to push that in front of him. And it really was, this is who we are, this is what we want, this is what it's going to cost. And we walked away with 5 million. Now, it's not always that easy, but you've got to get the strategy. You've got to get really savvy, and this is how it works. You know, the biggest learning I've had, and I've had so many learning curves on this journey, believe me, has been the political bullshit and machinations that you've got to go through. You know, you can't waste their time. You've got to walk in, you've got to tell them what you want. And I'd say it's numbers that matter. They'll sit up and listen if we all get together from all our different perspectives and say, this is an issue, it's complicated, we've got some answers, this is what we can do.
Thanks, Craig. And for anyone who's not, I'll post a link to Craig's organisation in the chat box, and I'll say it out loud as well. It's the Survivors and Mates Support Network, which supports men who are victims of sexual abuse.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Craig. And also a member of Australian Men's Health Forum. Thanks for your support of our organisation. It's great to have your voice as part of the broader men's health
for sure
conversation. So, any hands? Go into the participants box. We've still got 90 participants online. Click on participants. Click on raise hand. Justin Wilbur.
Hi there. I raised my hand a little while ago, and now I've got too many questions, so I'll put my hand back down for now. Thanks, guys.
Justin, do you want to there's 90 people in the room. Just tell us who you are, so that those that don't know actually know.
Well, I wear many hats. I'm a community presenter for the Black Dog Institute, the chair of Survivors of Suicide Incorporated. I'm with the Ballarat Health Services Consumer Partnership Program, as well as the Ballarat Health Services Committee. And until this morning, I was part of the Primary Health Network's District Suicide Prevention Place-Based Trials Leadership Group as well. I actually resigned from that this morning due to a conflict of interest, which I've mentioned as some of it in the chat. I've been trying to roll out a program of Safe Talk training for years 11s and 12s in schools, accompanied by a play that's been Mindframe endorsed. And I find that organisational silos and what I call paycheck protection is actually my biggest blocker. So an organisation that won the tender for Safe Talk training in Ballarat dobbed me into the PHN, who then called a meeting for an hour to give me a veiled ultimatum of either do your own thing or stay on the group. So I resigned. I'm doing my own thing. This conversation and these statistics and the losses that we're experiencing in Australia and across the world can't afford for organisational hierarchies and bureaucracy and protection of funding to continue. It needs to be addressed, and that sort of schoolyard rubbish I have no tolerance for. Most recently, I'm accredited for the Driveway at Dawn movement for Anzac Day. So although that's outside of my suicide prevention space, that was also part of the driver for it, was to, in the veteran suicide space, there was a lot of people who are feeling rather disenfranchised after the cancellation of those public events. So I created the Driveway at Dawn movement. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you. Good to meet you for the first time.
Glenn, can I take an opportunity to jump in there based on some of what Justin has said? And also comments that Tim has made about localism and that others have talked about. And in fact, people online have been talking about situational approach, and this is broadly associated with situational approach and community capacity building, etc. A couple of years ago, I had a chance to be in your neck of the woods, Justin. I was in Bendigo rather than Ballarat. And Bendigo every year does an extremely well organized across community, across organizational, out of the shadows march and commemoration. They get about 600 people there from the local area. Everybody has to turn up. The mayor has to turn up. The federal MP has to turn up. The state MP has to turn up. It is led by people of lived experience. It comes completely from the community rather than kind of an overlay, but within a very good set of parameters of organization and outcomes and achievement and what we want to get done here. And sure enough, who are the MPs that are most activated in Victoria around suicide prevention issues? It's those from the Bendigo area. You know, so the rule here is this in politics and political change: thingify it. If it ain't a thing, it's easily ignored. If it is an abstract, if it is a concept, if it is high-minded, it's easy to basically not pay attention to it. As a ministerial chief of staff, I once did a time calculation of how my minister spent his entire day. Rubbish emails, looking at correspondence, talking to colleagues, preparing for cabinet meetings, etc., etc. Genuine time to engage around new ideas, things that he hadn't heard before, might have been 5 to 10% of his day. So if it's not structured in the focused, disciplined way that Craig, for example, was talking about, our chances are well diminished. It's our opportunity to get our act together like that. Can we agree on stuff? Yeah, I do think we can. Even on this phone call, listen to the nature of our language. We talk the same. We know that one of the key changes that we all have to make is we have to get different language around male suicide prevention and the services that are delivered around it, right? So that's a great starting point, right in and of itself.
Great. And you know, something's really struck me, Pete, that in this conversation, there are these two emerging again, I'll say movements. It's not communities, but two emerging communities that together are very powerful, which speaks to the localism piece, but also speaks to the coalition of the willing, of the living that Brad referred to. So there is an opportunity, it seems, for those of us who have some weight at a national level, the mates and the Movembers and the Australian Men's Health Forum and Gotcha for Life, and people have got a focus on male suicide, but also have a bit of a national weight. There's the Men's Health Information and Resource Centre, I know, are online with us. Like Samson, who Craig just spoke to, different perspective, male victims of sexual abuse, but a national focus. There's the national way that can come together. But the bit you talked about was the power of the local. And something really exciting is happening for me, which reminds me of the Men's Sheds movement, because the Men's Sheds movement just began 25 years ago, say, with an odd community shed opening here and there. It wasn't coordinated, but it bubbled up to now we have 1,000 sheds and there are peak bodies representing it at state and national level. Well, the same thing is happening in men's mental health. There is this outbreak of local men's mental health organizations. They're ordinary blokes getting together around a barbecue, going for a walk together. We're bringing those organizations together on Saturday, the Men's Mental Health Movement Meetup. And what I'm hearing from them, a lot of them, is that it's not just about their thing, their model. It's about trying to connect the guys locally to whatever works. It's trying to build a movement from the grassroots up. So if we can work strategically together at the top, but also empower people at a local level to do those things you're talking about, to actually get in front of local MPs and make this an issue. In the UK, they used to talk about, when we lobbied, is it an issue on the doorstep? I don't know if you have doorsteps in Australian politics, but you certainly have also doorsteps in UK politics. Is it an issue on the doorstep? And the way we make it an issue on the doorstep is by people owning it locally. We've come to 3:30.
Glenn, I'm actually working on a national campaign for exactly that, which is about empowering communities to establish their own networks and committees and so forth, utilising things like the Wesley Life Force Suicide Prevention Network funding and tapping into Safe Talk and things. I just keep running up against blockers from the organisations that could actually empower such a movement. And I'll come back to Anzac Day. I launched the Anzac Day Driveway at Dawn movement on the 17th of March. And 2 weeks later, after 9 days of consultation, the RSL launched Light Up the Dawn. Rather than working with me, they took that intellectual property and passed it off as their own. It's something I find happens a lot in the sector. And it's incredibly frustrating because all it actually does is slows things down. Now, the Anzac Day movement was very successful. We had an estimated 30 million people in over 100 countries following the movement, but RSL has been thanked for it and none of my team have, even though we were actually the impetus for the entire project. It's really frustrating, and I find that the same sort of thing happens in this sector. I've put forward a lot of ideas through the committee that have been shot down, but then other organisations have gone and launched them with their millions of dollars of funding.
And I hear your frustration, Justin.
It is, and I love the idea of a coalition, and I think that maybe that is the way forward, because I'm just one dude in his lounge room, you know.
Gotcha. And yes, so thank you, Justin. I'm going to start winding this conversation down, but I'm going to ask anyone to jump in or jump off. It's entirely up to you now. I'm just going to stand here and see what shows up in this space, but it's officially over for now. And there are other events to follow this week, which I really encourage you to come and participate in. Thanks, Kate.
It's Karen McCall from South Australia. Just picking up on Justin's points, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm the advisor to the Premier's Advocate for Suicide Prevention here in South Australia. And we have 40 place-based suicide prevention networks operating in South Australia across various communities. So happy to have a conversation about how that started way back, I don't know, some 10 years ago. But yeah, it is doable. We've got 40, we've got them operating, they're all community based. 30 plus of them are in regional communities. I'm
actually quite familiar with the South Australian network. In fact, I came over in February last year to see the Save Your Mates Route. So Anthony Hart's on the call with us. I've been involved with the station and a number of other organisations over there. That's what I was trying to bring to Victoria, but very different. And in Ballarat, we have the highest rate of suicide in Victoria and a higher than national average. So it's very disheartening to find that the actions aren't being taken, and we continue to lose on average 200 people a year just in a town of 100,000 people.
Got it. Justin, I'm going to ask you both to take that conversation online and offline and allow someone else to, not that it isn't important and interesting. Thanks, Karen, Glenn. Thank you for that. certainly can echo that my experience of South Australia is what stands out in South Australia compared to any other state and territory is the breadth and strength of those local networks. It's a unique feature of the South Australian approach. Someone else? Jump in or jump off? We're down to 64 people. You're welcome to jump in if you haven't spoken. And you're welcome to jump off and say goodbye. Hey, Callum.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. It's been really interesting to hear from everyone, some really great ideas going around. I've had to check through. I'm a little bit younger than most on this call. Basically, what I do is I host a podcast called Young Blood Men's Health Matters. And that is pretty much having conversations with young guys between 15 and 35 about their lived experiences of mental health and physical health struggles. It's about how they've managed to overcome adversities and what they've learned through their own situations. But the point of it is to encourage men to engage with their mental health and to tell their stories, or if they're not willing to tell their stories, then to at least listen and know that they're not alone, because we know that isolation contributes to that suicide rate and a lot of the other issues that contribute to that. I just wanted to say, if anyone here knows of a young man's story that is particularly powerful, get in contact with me and let me know about it. Into telling as many of those as we can. We've done about 30 episodes now, and that's across all kinds of social issues. Obviously, suicide underpins it all. I've had my own lived experience of losing a mate to suicide last year. That's why I started it. But it's a lot more than that. It's all the other things that contribute to men's health, and it's really targeting that age group, because I think there's not as many platforms out there for young guys and not as many voices for young guys. And as I think it was Glen was saying earlier about, you know, the Uber driver who was talking about suicide, and there seems to be a need out there of men saying, you know, they really want to have these conversations, they want to talk about it. So it's about how can we create platforms for men to do that. So that's what I'm doing. So if you know of any stories that should be being told by men of that age around these sort of topics, please send me an email, let me know. I'm also looking for ways to make that sustainable through funding, because it's been all self-funded. So if you want to get in touch with me and have any ideas, that would be really great to hear from anyone. Yeah,
and Callum, that wouldn't take much of the $1 billion to keep the podcast going, would it?
No, not at all. No, I'd be very stoked with a very, very small fraction of that.
So I posted a link to an article we wrote on our website about the Young Blood podcast, which then itself contains links out to your podcast if anyone wants to have a look there.
Great, thank you.
Great to heard your voice and heard about the work you're doing. Great to see your face, and thanks for joining the call.
Thanks so much.
I hope we're going to see some more of you during the month on the Men's Health Connected.
Absolutely.
Okay, you're welcome to jump in, jump off. Anyone? We're down to 45 now. Anyone just want to say hello? I haven't seen them for a while. Callum's posted his contact details there. Jonathan Bedlow, you've popped up on my screen. What have you got to say for yourself?
Oh, look, just good to be part of the whole conversation and to see so many familiar folks from around the place. Craig's on my screen up there as well at the moment. Mr. Wild. I just think, yeah, that coalition idea, you know, seems to be a good idea. That you would have thought to get 100,000 to actually really convene that and grow that campaign might be quite doable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, when we did the National Male Suicide Prevention Conference 3 years ago now, nearly, it was in November 2017, one of the thoughts I had in my mind, in fact, we had a conversation about developing, we called it a network at the time, and I just think we didn't quite have the resource or the, you know, the energy actually behind it to come together. And I think I'm feeling that actually we have been running as you know, Jonathan, a sort of an online suicide prevention network on Workplace through MHF, and it's there's a few people connect on there, but it's really not what I had initially hoped it would be 3 years ago. but I feel like there's more of an energy and more of a desire to do that. And I think MHF as an organisation, which was really just finding its feet 3 years ago in terms of being funded for the first time, has probably got more capacity and more knowledge and understanding of how to do that kind of work and be the organisation that potentially convenes that type of collaboration. So, yeah, I'm very open to that idea.
I wonder if that workplace platform might be a good place to continue that. I've fallen out of that, so keen to get back in, but I don't know.
You haven't missed anything because there's been no conversation in there for about 5 weeks. So we'll get you back on there, and we'll also, we'll invite people who've come on this call and stuff to join and see where it goes with a larger group of people. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So you're going to pop along tomorrow?
I am. Yeah, I was rather frightened to see my name's got me down as a host on this call.
I'm not sure how that happened. Yeah, interesting. No. Did you write that? Was it not?
No,
I was surprised too. Yeah, you've been promoted. You've been volunteered in. Right, 37 people. Jump in, jump out. Anyone want to say hello? Say goodbye.
Yeah, Glen, Tony here. How are you?
Hey, Macca. How are you, my friend?
Good, mate. Does technology allow us to print what's been in that chat box? There's been a stack of info. I've been kind of taking photos, but it might be a bit easier. Can we get a print or email of that?
I'll get it over to you. Note to Mick, our producer. We're going to save all those. I don't think there's anything confidential in there. Just lots of actual stuff that people openly shared with. I just ask that you don't reprint it anywhere. Just use it for your own.
Yeah, just make it Chatham House.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, some really good sharing on that.
That with the group. I'm very happy to share that out. Yeah.
Tony, if you just right click in that chat window, you can select all and then copy it to your clipboard.
Oh, okay.
So that sounds like that's enabled for everyone. Yeah, you can do that. So 3 dots, bottom right-hand corner. Click on there, save chat. It should download into your downloads.
Cool. You sound like you're going to be a handy connection up the road, Justin.
Yeah, I've spent a few years in IT.
Good man.
Quick question for Callum, if he's still with us. When you said you were looking for young fella stories, can you give us an idea of how young? Like what age group you're looking for?
I think he's popped. I think he's gone. I think it was up to about 25. I think, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you qualify still, Justin. I don't want
to. I know people that might.
Yeah, I tried to get on, but apparently even a young-looking 50 doesn't count. Okay, we're down to 30 participants. Anyone else want to say, who's not spoken, want to say just hello, goodbye? Paul Kefford said goodbye.
I can say hello if you can hear me.
Yeah, who's that?
My name is Julian Root. I've only just joined the meeting because I was in something else.
Good day, Julian.
Sounds like I'm catching the tail end of it if everyone's leaving.
Yes, you are.
But I'm keen to try and get on for some of the other things later in the week, especially Thursday.
Where are you from, Julian?
I'm working in Armidale, New South Wales, in New South Wales Health. I'm working in a new position that's just been created of, it's called drought psychologist.
Ah, okay.
So we're just in the process of putting all that together and figuring out where it's going to fit in amongst other services that are available up in the Hunter New England area, mainly in the rural areas of that Hunter New England area. So I'm not sure exactly where this where this whole mob of people is from that you're talking to now, but
yeah, all around the country. But certainly, well, probably tomorrow's event you might get a little bit of stuff with different PHNs, but also definitely Thursday.
Yeah,
Thursday is our Rural Men's Health Day.
Yeah,
it's people from all over the country, but our very first session I think is on we're talking about COVID-19, drought, bushfires, all the and there's a number of certainly a number of New South Wales rural organisations involved in that.
Yeah, and even
we're looking at the programme and seeing what's going on there. There might be some interesting connections.
Yeah, that starts at 10, I believe. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yep. So Yep, I'm keen to look at that, but just to link in general too, not just, local services, but just getting ideas and information going around this whole topic. So.
Great, lovely to meet you, Julian. Look forward to seeing you at one of the other events. Just to answer your question out loud, Stuart, yeah, we are Stuart O'Neill is a video of today. We are videoing all the sessions. What we will do with that and how soon we make that available, I'm afraid you're going to have to wait. But we will do our absolute best to make, there's some really quality conversation.
Yeah, hi, probably a good time for me to jump in while everything's quiet.
And ideas coming out today, and so we want to make sure all that information is more widely.
Can I be heard?
You can.
Oh, sorry, I just thought nobody could hear me. Talk to myself. Brian here. Just wanted to say hi, as you said, and just thank everybody for the input, including those who have left and won't hear me now. It's been really good to be a part of it and just listen in. I've been presenting QPR as a live presentation, travelling around the country prior to COVID. Hope to take it up again once COVID finishes. And that's been really interesting, presenting to people who are dealing with high-level professional people who are highly distressed and suicidal. So it's been really good to have an input into that. But I'm just taking on a role as a chaplain in a primary school here in the Wollongong area, and I'm interested to pick up any hints and tips at all throughout some of the notes I've seen and people who have said, hey, let's keep in touch, just to see what useful things I might be able to pick up to use with primary school aged, well, boys in particular in this case, because I have a particular interest in in men's suicide prevention. But as a general anyway, with primary school kids. So if anybody's got any ideas, suggestions, feel free to connect. And thank you again, everybody.
That's great, Brian. So whereabouts are you based?
Wollongong, New South Wales.
Wollongong, okay. And look, we've got an event on, we've got a couple of events on, we've got an event that's definitely on boys' health next week. So it might be worth checking that out. But also later on in the program, we've got a large number of organisations working with younger men and boys who are getting together for a young men's symposium. There's a few of those, like teachers, psychologists, and people working with things like, it's called YAM, I forget what it stands for, which was the Youth Mental Health.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I've actually assisted with a few schools with the YAM program when it first started. And that's interesting. It's not as intensive as perhaps something like mental health first aid, but yeah, it's been a fairly good program.
Good. Well, keep an eye on this other one. Well, the one I've just posted is more is a bit more general, but just in terms of the kinds of people who are in those conversations. So have a look at, it's only an hour and a half, the Boys Men's Health Symposium next Thursday. And then in about 3 weeks' time, we haven't published the program yet, but you might not want to come to the whole event, but that event there, the Young Men's Symposium, what's great about that is when you see the program, it's going to connect you to loads of different organizations and individuals who are really passionate about working with young men and working with boys. So
is that the link you just put on the notes?
In the chat box there, yeah.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and what's your surname, Brian?
Bolton.
Brian Bolton?
Yep.
I'll keep an eye out for you on our sort of registration list as well, and if anything pops up, I'll reach out.
That'd be terrific. Thanks for that.
You're very welcome. Well, thanks for joining. We're down to 20 participants. Anyone want to? I'm gonna stick around till, if we're still here at 4 o'clock, I'm going. So that's not to say I don't want to hear from you. It's 10 to 4. Not you, Tony. We've already spoken to you. Love you dearly. Anyone else? Good to see you, Tony. So,
yeah, Glenn, I'll just jump in. Michael here from Adelaide, South Australia.
You're Michael from Coffs Harbour. I still can't get it into my head that you're Michael from Adelaide.
Oh, Coffs Harbour, then Port Pirie, and now Adelaide. So I've moved the wrong direction. Just acknowledge and thank you for what you're doing, Glenn. Yeah, great work, great work.
Thanks so much. Lovely to see you. It's been too long.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm signed up for some more for this week, and I'll see how next week unfolds. Really looking forward to the rural and remote day. Real passion for that area, and men in rural areas, and also older men, as I'm moving into the older man, am sadly in the older man status. So yeah, anyway, thanks for the great work you're doing, and yeah, I'm off.
Thanks for being here. Great that you are. Is Stuart O'Neill still on? No, I must make a note to send. He's asked for something. Must make a note to send something to Stuart O'Neill. Anyone else want to jump in or jump off before 4 o'clock?
This is Julian again from Armadale.
Hey, Julian.
Just quickly, I just tried that control-click and in the chat box to try and get all the chat information.
Yep.
But it seems to only come up with stuff from 3:38 p.m. onwards.
Which will be because you didn't join till 3:38. So
that's no good.
No, don't worry. We'll organise that for you. Who's on that can? Who's on from my team? Lynn, are you on and listening? If not, I'll make a note and do it.
Yeah, I'm here, Glenn.
Could you download and send to Julian Rote?
Yes,
remind me, I'll make sure we've got his contact details. Could you also make a note to Stuart O'Neill to send the Tuesday programme? I'll also make sure we've got the email for you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Julian. We're down to 17, 7 minutes to 4. Anyone else want to say hello? I wonder if those people are actually there, or they're just, just got their computer in the background.
Hi, it's Michelle from Eastern Health down in Victoria.
Hey, Michelle.
It's pouring rain down here. Thanks for all your hard work in this environment. And I work with a couple of small teams in the public mental health arena for suicide prevention. So
yeah,
I might have gone to your workshop last year or the year before.
Right.
We practice solution-focused brief therapy, which is a really lovely way of approaching things through. Really, it's around words we use in conversation, and where we actually help people think about how they managed to, what their reasons for living are, and how they've managed to survive so far, and where they want to go to. So we've found that useful, but it's also lovely having the framework that you presented to actually help support us through all the stuff that we do at the pointier end, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes. Great. Oh, thanks for that, Michelle. It's good to get that feedback. Are you joining us the rest of the week at all?
Yeah, I'm going to try and duck in and out between clinical demands, but yes, I will. I've registered for everything, I think.
Right, excellent. Look forward to seeing you during the rest of the week. Now, I'm going to have to move room, but I'm going to stay connected. Hopefully my internet will still reach me. So you've still got a chance to jump in or jump off. 17 people still in the room. Just going to turn my camera off while I adjust myself. And if not, I'd like to hear from Mick. If not, okay. I think we've reached the natural point of the end, Mick. So we'll ask you all to jump off now and say goodbye while we do what we need to do as the production team to officially close the room down. Thank you very much, all. If you're staff, you can stay on. If you're a visitor, I'd ask you please say goodbye. We're closing the rooms. Have you got no homes to go to? Time, gentlemen, please. All those things. Thank you so much for taking part. Looking forward to seeing many of you at the other sessions during the week.